Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is Erik Kleinsmith. If that name sounds familiar to you, he was the chief of the intelligence branch of the U.S. Army. Prior to that, he was the commander of D Company, 165th Military Intelligence Battalion, which is to say he commanded our own Pete A. Turner in Bosnia. Erik earned a BA in Political Science from Purdue, go Boilermakers, and a Master's in Intelligence Studies from the American Military University, and he's currently the Associate Vice President for Strategic Relations in Intelligence, National, Homeland, and Cybersecurity for AMU. His experience in intelligence and security-related training and analysis is as extensive as it comes, and it includes counterintelligence, information operations, and asymmetric threats and tactical military operations. He's been a leader in the intelligence community, in conducting intelligence operations, and in the future development of operations and analysis. Erik pioneered the development of asymmetric threat analysis using cutting-edge data mining technology, and he gained national notoriety related to his involvement in the Able Danger program as the military lead of a team of analysts profiling and mapping Al-Qaeda prior to 9/11. His intelligence training courses and programs as a contractor are delivered by 150 instructors today, and his work has been featured on several national media outlets. Most recently, Erik has been a member of a private investigative team in the ongoing case of identifying the true identity of the notorious criminal known as D.B. Cooper, and he gave us the inside details of that story about 2 weeks ago, right here on the Break It Down show during Special Operators Week. Now, on the subject of special operators and intel folk, they are among the team at our favorite cause, Save the Brave. You can read about them at savethebrave.org. And this week, they're hosting the Simon R. Litke Memorial Golf Tournament. It's at the Temecula Creek Inn Golf Course this coming Friday, October 4th. Save the Brave is a certified 501c3 nonprofit organization, and the tournament will help fund their ongoing mission to help veterans cope with post-traumatic stress. You can register for the tournament at savethebrave.org/event, and that link will be on our website. I urge you to do it fast. The tournament slots are almost full, and the tournament is this Friday. We also urge you to help us out by rating and reviewing the Break It Down show, especially if you like us, on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to fine podcasts like ours. Every positive review helps more listeners find out about us, and we always like to grow the tribe. So, register for the tournament, rate our show, and you can do those things while you listen in on one of the most fascinating guys at the forefront of defense intelligence. He's our special guest today. Here is Erik Kleinsmith.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Ted O'Neill from Diablo Barbell, and you're listening to The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Hi, this is Erik Kleinsmith from American Military University, and you're listening to The Break It Down Show.
From AMU to, where am I at? Santanella, California, recording live at a Starbucks outside. So if you guys hear some sideways noise, that's just because I'm on the road. But it's time to get shows in, and ultimately that's what a spy like me does. And this is one of those Spy versus Spy episodes. Erik was my commander in Bosnia way back in the 1990s. And I love doing these shows, Erik, because we get a chance to talk about the actual practical job, the tactical job of collection. And, I say the word spy because, that's what people identify with. But just all of the different ways we do our job, all of the different things, like you commanded spies. You've done all kinds of other, intelligence, espionage related missions. I think it's great to explore these things with real technicians who know what they're doing.
Right. Well, some days you feel like a spy master, and some days you just feel like a caterer. depending on who you're working for. So it was all good.
Yes. So I don't want to disparage Paul Norwood's name, although he deserves it. But he was not the commander that you were. But ultimately, you were barely my commander. We were at a remote camp, and what you did day to day really largely didn't directly affect me because of how we all were spread out trying to do our job in Bosnia. And that's not to say that you weren't a good commander or anything else, but your job is different. And a lot of military command, I would say 99% of military commands don't involve having most of your teams scattered to the winds, going outside of the camp and having special rules that allow them to do things like hand people money and drink.
Right. Well, I tell you, it's difficult. I mean, I didn't know Paul very well.
Hey, this
I
is
knew
Pete,
him
real
later
quick. I just want to let you guys know we are proud to announce our official support
part of the ranks
of Save the Brave, a certified
several intel
nonprofit
officers that we, as a
501c3
tactical
with a
environment, you got to
charter
go
of helping
tactical, and you
veterans
got to
with
go into a
post-traumatic
specialty
stress.
assignment
Here's how
like
you can
counter
help.
intel.
Go to
stuff like that. So it's a
SaveTheBrave.com,
difficult
click on the
thing
link
to
on the
pick up.
website. And my recommendation is this: subscribe.
The struggle that
Give
I
me
had
$20
is
a month.
when
You've got subscriptions you can turn off right now that you're not using that are $20 a month. Swap that out.
I think we were
Let's
tracking
help these
17
folks out.
teams at one point, and it didn't dawn on me until we were done with the deployment that we got everybody together to rehearse movement out through Croatia and Hungary and then back to Germany, where I didn't realize it until we got everybody together and a lot of the folks started introducing themselves to each other. And it means that these guys and gals have been apart from each other for so long that a lot of people didn't even know each other anymore. With the new people coming in, as well as all the temporary folks, the linguists that we brought in, the interrogators that were there. A lot of people don't know, but we had a linguist company that was brought to us from California. And they were Russian linguists, but they took them through a Serbo class just to give them some Serbo-Croatian and allow them to function. Well, it was, then try to integrate those folks into your company. It's just, every day it was a struggle like that.
Yeah, we had Sergeant Cipriano and Sergeant McMarlin joined us. And we were mid-flow. We already had our source network built. We, in a lot of ways, we had already mapped it so well that there wasn't a lot of work specifically for us to do at that point. I mean, we had a good sense of what was going on. And at that, when they got there, was, at least where we were, the bigger threat had kind of waned, and we realized that the agreement was holding. Did you guys get a sense for that at the company level? Like, is that what you guys sort of got?
Yes and no. I mean, part of it was, you saw the agreement was holding while we was there, but then you always had the feeling that, we're just here for halftime. And as soon as, if we pull out precipitously, or if we just do it, capricious pull out for a political reason or something like that, they're just going to go back at it. And that's the problem with understanding peacekeeping operations. It's not just a one and done, run. We were there for, over a decade. And I still remember that the amount of time and investment we had to put in there, and we always were wondering, is this going to matter? It wasn't until you got near the end, you said, yeah, I think this might.
So as a commander, when you take over this unit that's deployed, it's a combat command. And as an officer, I mean, that's what you're waiting for, right? Is command time. Did you get out of the experience what you wanted, or because of the nature of our mission, was it something different than what you expected?
It was actually a culture shock, because up until that time, the only units that I had been in have been infantry and armor units. And just the mentality and everything else. While I was in command, and I was in command for 15 months, I never gave out a single instance of non-judicial punishment. I never had to. Nobody who is an agent or an interrogator gets in trouble. Meanwhile, the company that's, the other company, the Lurch company that's in our same battalion, all infantry guys and light infantry at that, they would keep a goldfish jar full of rank that was taken from soldiers from the dumb things that these guys would do. And it was just filled up with PV2 wings and specialist rank and NCO rank and things like that soldiers had lost because of drunken disorderly or whatever they did. I think they one of them got caught keeping a goat in the barracks. Just things like that. But that was the environment that I came from. But at the same time, the other culture shock was, and it was really up at the leadership or at the officer level, was was not used to the culture of so many warrant officers and so many other company grade officers trying to work together. We had 20 warrant officers in our company. And, that by itself is a whole nother, it's a whole nother animal, somebody trying to manage and lead and direct from a day-to-day basis.
Is it hard? I mean, I've worked with infantry units too. Is it harder to manage a bunch of egos and smart people and high-ranking people? I mean, look, if there's someone who doesn't give a fuck about, what you think as a captain, it's a warrant officer. They just
right.
Yeah, they don't care.
Right. I mean, it's just a totally different approach. I mean, just I was an M1 tank platoon leader before, and then I was a scout recon leader. And we had, generally, it's just a different mentality altogether. Even though it's all, an Army unit, it's completely different. I remember, I first got deployed to Germany. There was an instance in Fulda where a Cav soldier was upset that his squad leader was sleeping with his wife. And so he killed him in front of the dining facility and beheaded the guy. He's known as the Butcher of Fulda. I know this because I was friends with his defense attorney, who's since passed away. But you tell this story to combat soldiers about the guy, beheads this guy with a machete, takes his head, puts it in a bag, takes it to the hospital where his pregnant wife is suffering from complications. And apparently he goes into the wrong room and the head rolls out of the bag, and he's got to put the head back in the bag and take it to his wife's room and put it on her headstand. And you tell this story, and as gruesome as, without even going into the details, gruesome as this story is, when you tell this story to an infantryman or an armor soldier, the first question that I got back was, and it came like, what I really want to know is when the head rolled out of the bag, how'd they pick it up? Did they pick it up by his nose, his ears? And that's, that was the mentality of what they wanted to know, not just the whole, oh my gosh, that was horrible, somebody's life ended. That was their mentality. You don't get that in an intel unit, no whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that was such a sensational case. I was in the chow hall doing they basically shut that post down at the point that I was there. And it was just like an empty space where you could go put a whole bunch of people for an exercise. And so someone showed me like, that's the phone booth where he grabbed and who knows if that's true and everything, but that's where he chopped his head off and he walked away with it. You're just like, what in the heck? God,
Right. And that's what I mean. It's like you expect the biggest tragedy. If somebody tells you before you take command that 10% of your soldiers are going to cause you 90% of your problems.
Right.
Well, everybody has it. I had it. 10% of the folks caused me 90% of my problems, but there was nothing compared to things like this. When I was a brigade intel officer for 3rd Brigade 3ID, and I got a call from a German telephone company that says, hey, we're going to disconnect the payphone in the infantryman's barracks. And I was like, why? I said, well, I'll be there in a second to show you. So we get there, we go to the payphone, and somebody had run 28 lines out the back of the payphone so that everybody had free calls back home.
Oh, wow.
To the U.S. So they broke in and basically hacked the system and broke into the phone. Well, they racked up $6,000 worth of long-distance phone calls inside of one weekend. I mean, there's different problems that, if we had done things like this, I generally assume that for either counterintelligence agent or interrogator, your career's over at that point if you do something like that.
Yeah.
Your clearance is gone, all of that.
I was the 2 at the 309th. So first, for the audience's sake, the 309th was the spy training battalion where everybody went. And it's an enormous group of people. It's actually 5 companies that are all battalion sized. So really, because it's training, there are just thousands of people, and you're not staffed up for it. And as the 2, even as a low-ranking guy for being a 2 for a giant battalion, I got to see the blotter, and it was always the prior service line unit dudes that would get in a fight in the pool hall and just give their careers away,
Right. My best one was this, and we were in Vilseck, Germany, which is close to Nuremberg, and we had one where there was a bar fight between an entire squad of infantrymen and the rest of this entire German bar. Wow. And then the blotter that the military police write up, it talked about how the injuries sustained, and all the guys that were infantrymen had cuts on their hands and wrists, and one had a broken arm, things like that. But then all the injuries on the Germans were lacerated faces, broken noses, and missing teeth and things like that. So who won that fight just by reading the blotter and the injuries, and that's just that's the entertainment that you got on the weekend of gosh, who did something this weekend? But I mean, that's just, you got a bunch of single guys in a foreign land with, a lot of time on their hands and not a lot of freedoms. And it gets tough once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the time with the 165th. Okay. Let me ask you this question. One of the guys that co-hosts with us a lot is best-selling author Scott Husing, and he's a Marine. And they have the 2-4 Association, like 2nd Brigade, 4th Battalion, basically.
Right.
Those guys are like family. We are not. Why is there not like a big 205th, 165th federation of people who all kind of stick together? And there's a lot of other, the guys from the USS Indianapolis to this day, 70 years later, still get together. But but for the most part, the Army doesn't do that.
Well, I'm still very close to everyone I was with in the 1st Battalion, 6th Infantry. And that was my first unit. And I'm still friends with guys from when I was in an armored battalion in Colorado Springs. But the 1/6 Infantry group, because we were in Germany, and it was, again, a very closed group of folks, I was the battalion intel officer for it. It was infantry battalion. Well, the battalion commander was a guy named Carter Ham, who just recently retired as a 4-star general. He was the AFRICOM commander before retirement, and now he is the president of AUSA. He was such a down-to-earth commander that he recently threw a retirement party for our chaplain who finally retired, and this was just back in March or April, at his house in Northern Virginia. And we had guys showing up from Kentucky and Michigan and Ohio and I think Boston and Philadelphia just to come to this one afternoon to spend time with their brothers in arms in this infantry battalion. I think the difference is, again, as we talked about earlier, is that in the 165th, everybody operated in independent teams. And so guys hardly knew each other while we were downrange because we were in 4 8-man teams split up amongst all the other units. And then once we went back to Germany, we split up again into the field offices. And so we had, folks, they're all over in different areas. Guys just didn't know each other the same way that a band of brothers would.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. When knowing what you know now, I mean, because being a captain in charge of some people in Bosnia, it's a totally different thing as like a fully grown and matured, seasoned, adult espionage person. What do you want to tell that young guy who's trying to run this team with people all over the place? What does he not know that he needs to know?
Part of it is you have to worry about your team first. Don't worry about don't worry about the company. Don't worry about the higher headquarters. In terms of your very start, is you have to get to know that everybody on your team so that that part of the machine is working like clockwork. And that's the big area of concentration. A lot of times we got, each of these teams they're not led by, they're led by warrant officers. And warrant officers are generally either came from the ranks. And you had some warrant officers that were NCOs before they were warrant officers, and they acted like NCOs. But then you had some warrant officers that were privates and specialists before, and guess what? They acted like privates and specialists. So you had some, great, fantastic guys, and you had some guys that needed work, and I had to spend more attention to them to make sure they were spending more time with their teams, treating their folks right. What killed me about intel more than anything else was how often I had to ask myself when dealing with somebody, is like, where did you learn it was okay to treat somebody else like that? And that to me was one of the toughest parts from a moral standpoint of having to exert leadership where I didn't think it was necessary before, but I just see it's how poorly we can treat each other on a day-to-day basis. And that was unacceptable to me.
When you got to the unit that Command before was not very good at treating people well, there was a lot of mistrust. I know I had a lifelong significant beef with the guy who was in Command before you. Do you have a sense of that? How do you reckon with that? How do you take these people that have an extremely complicated and dangerous job with a lot of legal ramifications if they get it wrong? How do you lead that then? I mean, what do you do to manage this unit that's likely overtasked and independent as hell, but also doesn't have a lot of respect for the command in general because of the guy before you.
Well, part of it is, and I saw in especially with the 165th and showing up there, just an indicative. And this was my only intel unit I was ever in. I was at Combat Arms and doing special missions after that. But what I learned was you can't do everything. And so I prioritized, and there was just a lot of stuff that I didn't do. And it was stuff that I had to weigh and say, you know what, this really is important. I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to take the hit for it if we don't, because it's just not the priority. And I even got into a discussion with the commander where he was trying to do a dozen things. And we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And I finally said, how about we, instead of half-assed and 12 things, how about we do 6 things right?
Yeah.
And do it to the letter. And I even had I don't want to say a colleague, but a peer of mine in the same, in a different unit that said, you know, hey, I work until 8 o'clock every night to get this whole list of all these things that the command wants done. Why is it that you're able to leave at 6 p.m.? And again, we're working 12-hour days every day. Yeah. And he's like, how are you able to leave work at 6 p.m.? It's like, because I don't do everything. He said, what? It's like, there's stuff that is just not important according to the priorities, and I'm not going to burn everybody out just to get, you know, whatever apple cart set up the right way. You know, just that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I found that to be true too. When I was left alone to do my own thing, once again, independent. But, you know, if I needed a nap, I took a nap. And when people would say, hey, you know, why are you going to take a nap? Because there's plenty of war in 90 minutes when I come back. Like, it's not going to be over. And it's not that you're not working. Like you said. And sometimes the commander says, I wonder. And that's like this indirect tasking to all of us to answer that question. But not really. Like, as long as you stay to the roots of what was going on, some of those wonders are things that you can go, yeah, I wonder that too. Let's keep on task, you know? Right.
And that's the thing is we can lose sight of the greater. I mean, you always have to take a step back. You can lose sight of the greater, you know, what the greater challenge is. I mean, I had a commander when I was a tanker. He got so exhausted in the field that he fell asleep mid-sentence while he was trying to brief us. And it ultimately got to the point where he had a nervous breakdown. He had to ask himself to be removed from command. I mean, and we weren't even in, you know, any stressful situation other than, you know, being, you know, at a station at Fort Carson and going downrange there and doing maneuvers for training. That was too much for this guy to handle. But part of it is just because they take so much on the chin, and you know, how can you trust somebody that you're going to go into combat with if they're unable to handle the stress of that environment?
Yeah, I've seen that quite a bit with different units and people just trying to work past the point of exhaustion. And I mean, I've hallucinated. I've been so tired, and I've always thought, how good of a decision can I make right now if I had to in a moment? You know, maybe you wake up, but I'm literally seeing things that aren't there because I've been up for so long. Right. It's, I definitely, it's fantastic that we're seeing the same things from different angles throughout our careers.
Right. And that's the thing is, like, I learned how to sleep standing up in the turret of the M1 tank, and I got it down, so I knew how to do that. So, and you know, the rest of your life as you go through different areas, somebody said, well, you know, you'll be in a situation and say, well, this stinks. It's cold. It's doing, you know what? I'm not trying to sleep standing up anymore. Yeah. I'm not waking up with rain, you know, in the rain. You know, I'm not eating in the rain. Yes. It's just that kind of thing just puts everything in perspective.
Yeah. I often say no one's looking at some iron sights at me deciding yes, no.
Exactly.
No one's trying to, no one's put a bomb and rubbing their hands together going any moment now, you know, it all gets easier after that. So, as someone who went through the collection school and, you know, did a lot of work to self-develop, I really have no idea how I built my tool set. It's powerful, but I couldn't say that any specific Army thing got me there, you know, because training is sort of just a baseline. You do figure a lot of it out. What are your thoughts on that? How does one develop into a good field operator?
You know, it's what's interesting is as I ran training for the Army after I got out as a defense contractor, I ran training for the Army Intelligence and Security Command for years. It was over a decade. And we started with 7 instructors and got up to 156 by the time, again, I reached burned out stage in 2015. And part of one of the classes I designed and developed and taught was counterterrorism analysis. And this was right after 9/11. And I drew from, and I realized that it's like, how am I going to be able to put this class together? But then I realized like I had that tool bag because I was doing counterterrorism analysis before 9/11 when we were tracking Al-Qaeda prior to it. And as we started pulling different things out, and it wasn't until I was talking to a retired colonel who was a friend of our family, and I was mentioning different things, and he finally stopped me and goes, God, you've done a lot of stuff. And that's when it hits you. It's like, you know what? All those pieces of experience are things that you're bringing together. The key is to be able to then articulate it and apply it so that it can be turned into a lesson learned instead of some anecdotal reference.
Yeah, I had the crazy fortune, and I want to get back into the Al-Qaeda stuff in a second, but as I went, so you go through training. I went to the 165th, sort of had an in-between job, but I was always, one of the role players for training. So we would go to a Schaffenberg and drink hot chocolate. And I did get to see all of the warrant officers, all the people with experience come through and try to run me as a source. And so I sort of got to watch how everybody else did it. And I'm a natural talker in person, people connector. So I was able to gather these things. So the training worked for me, but not in the way it was designed to work. And then when we deployed, as goofy as a leader as Bart Dachko was, he did insist that we do the work and go out, and we got to cut our teeth on asking questions, and I got excellent at that. Right. And then my next job after running sources was to go teach source operations at the schoolhouse. And again, higher level people that outranked me, people that I'd worked with would come through, and they would say, how did you get here? How did anybody know to put you here? So it's a funny accident. Does it? No. When you were in command of us, were you able to pick out like, oh, these guys collect well? I mean, are you reading the reports? Because on our end, we send stuff up and largely never hear anything again, except for like we had this Russian rail rocket launcher that was dead. We'd gone in and I'd cut a bunch of wires so that it wouldn't work. And that thing constantly got reported on, and we were constantly tasked out to go verify that it wasn't dangerous. And understandably, but apart from that, we didn't really have a lot of feedback on what we reported.
Right. The best feedback that you can get is when you receive a strategic report that comes down from, Washington or somewhere back in Germany, and it's your own stuff that's in there. And they're trying to tell you what's going on based upon your own reports. That was what we were finding in Tuzla, going back to the ops guys. And so, we're reporting well enough that that's the primary source for the entire nation is our guys that are doing muddy boots collection out in the field.
Yeah.
So that's...
Man, I like that you said that, because one of my key performance indicators for me when I would go work at a battalion or brigade is, did I hear my reports coming out of other people's mouths as I was in the staff room?
Right.
Were they quoting my work? And if they weren't, then I wasn't on the mark. Either they weren't reading my stuff because it wasn't valuable to them, or I wasn't getting the right things that are driving their mission. It was such a, because it's easy as an intel guy to think, oh, I've got the best intel in the world. But unless you have those KPIs, unless the commander's like, hey, Pete, come over here, I want to talk to you. And, he's not yelling at you. Unless you have those kind of things, you're largely, especially as an intel guy with access to the field, you're largely irrelevant, but you have to allow yourself to be so you can get better.
Right. I mean, I sent several of my instructors when I was doing training for the Army. I sent them to Fort Huachuca to do some coordination with their instructors, and somebody decided to give them a class on analysis, and they started showing them my slides.
Oh, wow.
And my instructors came back, and it just said some major had ripped off your stuff and was briefing it at their own. We had to correct them and saying, not only is this our boss's work, you're not even doing it right. And they had to show them exactly the right way to teach this particular block on I can't remember whether it was threat profiling or center of gravity analysis, something like that. So that to me, I was flattered by that. That's where I, finally got to the idea is like, this is, I have enough here now that I want to be able to put together and start working on a book of it. So
yeah, and let's talk about some of that work in a second. Can we get back to Al Qaeda though, pre 9/11, and what can you tell us about that work?
Oh, that was an operation. I was the last job I was on active duty was at a place then called the Land Information Warfare Activity, which is a new Army unit that was specializing in deception, psyops, operational security, all the things that had to do with information warfare at a very nascent stage. I mean, this is 98 to 2001, sorry. And as we started working, is also the first operation where data mining occurred in the Department of Defense. And so we were doing these fantastic pieces of analysis that, again, we had to write the book on ourselves because the engineers threw the tools in there and just said I could go to work. And so we were doing some great things. We were getting noticed because it was this information dominance center that the guy from Disney who designed the Starship Enterprise for the next generation, he designed this center, and it looked just like it, with the swishing doors and everything. But we got enough recognition that we finally were approached by folks in Special Operations Command and said, hey, we want to involve you in a mission or in a program. We don't really want to talk about it too much, but then this is what it is. And it turned out it was the Able Danger program, and we became involved in trying to map out where Al Qaeda was worldwide, and that was the RFI: find Al Qaeda worldwide, go, and that was it. And so we started getting hits from all over the world, but really 4 major areas: the North Africa, the Far East, the Philippines. We had ties there, obviously the Middle East, but then also the Balkans. Back into Bosnia, there was a heavy presence of Hamas and some of the other cells working there. And it got to the point where our data mining program was becoming so successful that DoD lawyers were then noticing that, hey, these guys are doing collection and they're collecting so much information, they are probably violating intelligence oversight rules, which is we're not allowed to collect on U.S. persons or retain that information for more than 90 days. And, the whole dilemma was centered around what does it count if a person does the collection or if a data mining tool does the collection and nobody has read it? Does that count? And until the lawyers could figure that out, they shut our whole program down. And
let's spend a moment defining that. So what you're saying is,
sure,
Pete can't go to an American camp and start collecting and trying to run or, develop a dossier on Erik. Like, that's against the law. There are some limitations where you're able to do it, but it's short term. And so what he's talking about is if Pete can't do it, could a robot in theory do it? Especially, it's not intel until it's disseminated. So if it's in there and nothing done, is it actually intel? Have we actually broken the law? Just want to explain that a little bit to the audience. Go ahead and go from there.
Yeah. No problem. I mean, and that's this is all these constraints were put on the U.S. military at the end of the Vietnam War with the different congressional investigations, the Pike and the Church committees. And that's really where the intelligence oversight came from, where we're just not allowed to spy, military, unless you're in a law enforcement or counterintelligence capacity, you're just not allowed to spy on other Americans, which is, understandable. It's very straightforward. But then what happens when a tool does it? And we were getting some extremely wild hits from our tools. That we had one tool say that the Michigan militia was being armed by the KGB to take over and create an independent northern Michigan. I mean, it was just, crack sites like that. But the same sites then would also pinpoint an Al-Qaeda cell operating a car dealership in North Africa and using that to funnel money through it. And for whatever reason, the guy was right. And we were able to corroborate that. That's the kind of stuff that you have to sift through when a data mining tool doesn't do that filtering for you. And so the entire operation was shut down by DoD lawyers. And it was that point where 9/11 occurred, a year after that, and we had realized afterward that we had that entire cell in New Jersey.
This is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk. I'll give you the advice on the right gear. The best plan is show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you. That's sustainable, that's scalable, fun.
What are they doing there?
At breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
Dig in there just because that's where I grew up. And that's when it really hit me home that this war that is about to come, many Americans don't know about it. So when 9/11 did happen, the first thing we talked about on the phone with the other members of our team was, so it begins. Now it's what we were talking about a year and a half ago. It is finally started.
Wow. So, yeah, dang, that's so crazy. Let me back up a little bit. When you get all these intel hits and you guys are trying to process and put the puzzle together, did you guys have the ability to put out RFIs or taskings to the units that held certain assets? Were guys with topsiders and English braid belts and dockers showing up and taking my source from me? Were you guys able to put any emphasis on what you guys were seeing to open the clamshell a little more?
It wasn't so much as that, because the places that we were looking, we just didn't have collection assets, not on the ground assets. I mean, we were looking all over the world. Where we were having trouble and frustration is we were not an intelligence agency. And so a lot of the other large 3-letter agencies, and I don't want to mention them by names, the initials are CIA, DIA, FBI, they did not they thought these are just a bunch of upstarts working in the second floor subterranean basement of this headquarters. These guys, there's no way these guys could match the accuracy and the power that we had for analysis. And so the cooperation from those folks were at the time, again, was non-existent. So it's that's just the way it goes. So is that after 9/11, when we knew we had these guys, we didn't talk about it much because it was a very secured, I'll say a deep program. But it wasn't until after one of our liaison officer to DIA, a guy named Tony Schaefer, finally stepped forward and blew the whistle. Next thing you know, I'm getting phone calls from 60 Minutes news crews and my own congressman. And I'll tell you, in the world of intel, when 60 Minutes calls you, it's not a sign of success. That you're doing a good thing. So
okay, so many questions.
Yeah.
So 9/11 happens. You guys say so it begins. But, I mean, so what? Like, you guys know so much more about what you're looking into because you've been into it. No one knew how to speak Arabic. No one knew about the Quran. No one understood, jihad in any kind of real. And I'm saying no one at the institutional level. We just weren't prepared for this kind of. We were still trying to sort out what we were going to do. Heck, right before you took over our unit, we were going to get rid of interrogators because that was never going to be part of our mission again. So. What does that look like to you guys, knowing what you knew, being so far ahead of the fight? What did you guys think?
The best comparison I could make is that from a modern standpoint, you could look at our team as really the listening post that was positioned on the north coast of Hawaii that was seeing the Japanese fighters come in before December 7th, 1941. That's really what we were. We were the warning beacon that nobody heard. And it wasn't until afterwards, they dragged me, and I got up in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and then the next year I was in front of the House Armed Service Committee, and it was really all to testify, why did the 9/11 Commission pass you guys up? And part of it is because we didn't talk about what we did. I mean, we didn't, really volunteer the information. The guys that did, it was really kind of embarrassing to say that, well, the Army had these guys identified, and there was a unit that was trying to sound the warning that said that, look, something's coming. These guys are already here. So that, from a historical standpoint, that's about the best anomaly that I can make, analogy that I can make of what we did.
And when these bad things happen and you guys have your finger on the pulse, even if it's threatening, you're not quite sure what you got. A lot of times, so just for example, my team was operating on the camp that got blown up in Iraq in the Chow Hall in 2004. One of the first reactions was, what did Pete and those guys, what did they get wrong? Why did they miss this?
Right.
And I was like, we don't even know what happened yet, Right. Did you guys get any of that heat at all where it's like, what did you guys screw up?
Yeah, a little bit. Most of it was, I was no longer on active duty when somebody finally blew the whistle and came forward. So DOD really couldn't touch me in that way. But what was sickening to me was the first time I had to go testify in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. The whole room was packed. There was a line out the door, hundreds of people waiting to get in, and I was amazed. I'm talking to the Senate staffer. It's like, who are these folks? He goes, well, a third of them are other Senate staffers that the senators or congressmen have sent here to find out what's going on. About a third of them are media, but then the other third are families of the victims of 9/11. And that's when it kind of hit me that it just sank right into my stomach that I felt horrible that I had to go in there and explain to these folks how we had the answers, but their family member is dead because we were not able to get the word
out. I'm a tactical guy, so I don't have a sense for this, but two questions that I'll give you, and I think you can handle these in order, whatever makes sense for you. One, the Army isn't typically the team that sounds the domestic alarm, like, hey, there's something coming.
No,
normally that's somebody else, at least in terms of how I understand it to work.
Right.
And the other thing is someone's always sounding the alarm. There's always, a lot of what we do, especially on the analysis side and briefing, is a sales job, and my threat is greater than your threat. So how much of that is like I get why the president's like, I'm tired of hearing your guys' intel briefs. You guys are just selling me a bunch of crap. I kind of get that because I've seen intel people sell something that just wasn't even real. It was like their theory, and they would become passionate about it.
Right. Well, I mean, part of it is, you're right. An Army unit, again, and we were a sub-team of an organization. I mean, we were an intel branch within an operational group within an intel headquarters. I mean, it was just, who are these guys? It's just, we really didn't rate. I mean, and I understand that. The other thing, though, is like I think all the peacekeeping stuff that we did in the 90s, we learned we learned how to do peacekeeping operations. We were not ready for this next fight. And so, and you can see that when at the beginning of the Iraq War, that when the forces first moved in, everybody moved on to their base camp and everything was great in the base camp, but all hell was breaking loose. Well, we learned that in the Balkans, where we stayed in our base camp and didn't bother anybody. And everybody, and the watchword success of a commander going there with his unit was to make sure that he took everybody and he brought everybody home.
Yeah.
There was no issues, no incidents, but we got down to the point where there was nobody doing, incidental misfires into the barrels in front of the base camps to check your weapons for ammo and things like that. That became a huge issue. That to me is not important. When I finally saw that we had some leaders in Iraq, Afghanistan that understood that we needed to get back out into the villages and into the streets and take those risks, that was the greater good for the success of the overall mission.
Yeah, funny. That's a lot.
I probably didn't answer what you were asking, but
I think that's great. I mean, it's because it is complex, and there are people that sell things that are threats, and it is hard to transition, especially when we don't know what our job is. A lot of times in Bosnia, especially, we were doing good work, but a lot of times you're just not near the thing that happens. There's a whole lot of people that are just people, and it can be really mundane, even as you go out into this dangerous area. And you're right. The command can want to. Let me say this. I heard a general in Iraq when we first got there in 2004, for sure influenced by this era. And he said, the number one goal is force protection. Well, that's easy, sir. Let's go back to Kansas, right in the middle, and never leave camp,
Right.
But that's not how you find, our peers, what I had to do was I had to go make friends with the worst people on the earth, or at least the worst people in the county that I worked in. Right. The people that had nefarious intent towards anybody, the evil people. And you just cannot reliably find them on the camp. I mean, I want them on the camp. I want to give them jobs so I can do what I do, but they don't offer that up on the camp. Right,
exactly. So I mean, that's just there's at least we're learning lessons now. I mean, I even know from a lot of the professional reading that the things that are now going on in Iraq, it's caused the Army to stop and go back to say, the Army had to create 4 interrogation battalions and then create an entire enemy or persons of interest or detainee or prisoner of war camp, whatever you want to call it. They created several of them in Texas to train interrogators how to work a prisoner of war or detention facility. Especially after what happened at Abu Ghraib. We hadn't had to run anything like that for decades before that.
Yeah.
And now they think that we're going to get everything right. While in the age of instant photography and things going viral, that one stupid mistake or several stupid mistakes from the folks that were there led to a national, tragedy.
Yeah.
That's how easy things can get screwed up. Just you're going viral for all the wrong reasons, but it just still happens.
If we had to put together a unit and go work in let's say a county-sized government in Afghanistan or Iraq, just not Baghdad itself, but Baghdad province, and you're going to go out and work, how many people do you need to go out and have a pretty good sense, a 65% solution as to what's going on and what's dangerous?
The best way to get that answer, and I just couldn't answer it off the top of your head because every place is going to be different.
Right.
It's astounded me how now Intel has escaped the Intel community, and the guys that I'd go to find that answer would be I'd go to a municipality here in the U.S. and talk to them, because they have Intel folks working, now for county sheriff's offices, for this, the New York City or whatever. I've trained some of these guys.
Yeah.
So New York has, I can't remember how many police, 80,000 police. Well, they got an Intel unit over 100 strong, and they need those guys to do the predictive analysis, to understand, the changes in graffitis, the gang patterns, organized crime. There's got to be somebody looking at that from a back perspective, and it can't be the guy that has to go out on the street and manage everything out there. And so those guys, law enforcement is making huge strides in analysis and force protection in those particular areas, because they've identified, years ago that this was an important piece. It's just taken them, they're behind DOD about 80 years in terms of, look, we need to create an actual team and have these guys focus on this particular area or this particular event.
One of the good things that I got to do is I got to stay in regions, and units would rip over the top of me and I would stay. So their boots on the ground knowledge was pretty good. They had a lot of familiarity with day-to-day operations, but they didn't grow past that point, because they get ripped out, come back as, one time you're a 2, then you're a 4, then you're a commander, then you're up at division. And so you don't get to build on your ground knowledge. You build on your organizational knowledge. And, the organization struggles to get out of its own way a lot. Is it that we need to have people that just focus on I was able to outperform a brigade in terms of their vision and get them to come around a lot faster. Me and another guy, 2 guys, 3 guys, and get the entire brigade to change its focus to the focus that the last unit had left with. What is it? Does that make sense to have people that are just dedicated to a region and they live a hard life, they work for 5 years and then come back, and then someone else rotates in somewhere through? Or how do we get by all the challenges that we have? The Taliban ultimately is going to be able to claim victory over us, even though we've got so many more assets. What you just said was a topic of a paper that a guy named Michael Flynn wrote either before or when I think it was just before he became the director of DIA, where he talked about how you needed to have teams that specialize in geographic areas, but then overlapping them, you also needed teams that would take on more strategic aspects. Like, we're just going to have you guys focus on the entire theater opium trade, because that we have to have somebody who can stand back and check those areas, because they're going to interlace with all the geographic teams, but one geographic team can't explain that entire phenomenon because he's only looking at one area. And so that's really my focus would be to build something like that, where you have interlapping areas of concentration for different assets. When I think about operations in terms of military, we talk about full spectrum. I like to think of spherical spectrum, because you're trying to develop capacity in the government, the security forces, and we all have our partner is the best partner, but the guy below us and above us is an asshole. And that's,
of course,
right? But it doesn't work. Like, you should be able to say, hey, let's test the system. This guy here at this platoon, they need ammo. They've put a request in. I've watched them put the request in, and I lose track of it because there's not like a reliable way to track where the request goes and where it stops, or if it actually exists or not.
Right.
But but you can't move things vertically up and down a chain, or an American would be mad at an American because, we were told at one point that the governor of this area was a basket case. And so, we were hey, Rich and Pete, go talk to that guy and see what happens. And we talked to him. He was anything but a basket case. It was just a bunch of bad American perceptions that had polluted this guy. And,
right.
he doesn't know anything. Like, actually, he's not available right now because it's their fiscal end of year and he's working on his budget. Does that sound familiar to you, Army guys? And they're like, he's doing what?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And they couldn't even believe, because they had such a bad opinion of this guy. He wasn't even allowed to be good. Even if he was doing great things, it wouldn't have mattered.
Right. Well, and that's what you're describing is a bias. And when everybody thinks about a bias or a mindset, they think of it only in terms of politics, which politics ruins everything it gets involved with. I mean, that's granted. But there's other biases that you run into in intel. One is just personality bias. You just may not like somebody because he's a jerk. So everything you read about that guy, or if he's somebody who's in a next neighboring unit, the guy. You're not going to read it just because you don't like the guy who wrote it. That's a bias. Yeah. You also have a technical bias, whereas we'd pay attention to some sources, but we knew that it was heavy in SIGINT and ELINT and other forms of technical collection. But we'd have to go check other sources to be able to corroborate that, and that different. They'd have a technical bias on how they would relate it. Even some of the open sources we looked at. I mean, we did a heavy collection in a lot of different news sources. It took us a little while to figure out that Reuters obviously was a very heavy European focus, and so when we're data mining, we'd see more hits that had a European perspective. That's not the ground truth compared to everything else.
Oh, the ground truth. That's my thing. I love that stuff. Ground truth happens below boots in the ground, right? Like, it's hard to see ground truth.
Absolutely.
When I go on a patrol and I've got enablers and we're all there with the infantry unit, and I come back with a completely different story that's factual, that I can go back 3 days later. We all had these operations, and I go back and I go, hey, what happened 3 days ago? And if I can't find that report, if I can't find the goat inoculation program or the NGO that's going to have a lady selling blankets, if I can't find them, the ground truth says your boots on the ground are wrong with what they're reporting. Commanders, they thrive on that stuff.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the thing is, we even at the tactical level, you're going to get different sources, or you're just going to get a guy who's like, I don't like that guy. Why? Because I think he's a jerk.
Yeah.
Well, that changes your perspective on everything. It's just, the biggest thing you really got to worry about is this report trying to inform me, or is this report trying to persuade me?
Yeah.
And if it's doing if you're seeing indicators that it's trying to persuade you, and you get that everywhere, but it's like that all of a sudden you got to look at that more skeptically. That's really all it is.
You guys can find Erik, his work on LinkedIn. You can find Erik Kleinsmith on LinkedIn. You can also see when he publishes things in inpublicsafety.com. And also, you've got an article in Homeland Security magazine. Let's talk about your book, because I don't want to spend the whole hour just talking shop. Let's plug what you're doing.
Well, the book is shop. I mean, that's that's what it is. Well, the book I wrote comes out December 2nd. I just finished final edits this week with the publisher, Cognell, and they're out of San Diego. They came to me because I was writing articles for our school blog that got picked up by a couple of different pieces. And it was all based on, I got an article, one of the most popular ones is how to do analysis when you find a female within a terrorist group. Right. And why, what's the difference of having a female, why they're drawn differently in terms of their motivations, and then the actions of the group. There's all these different indicators that a female will get. And that's just one of the articles that I put together. I had the publisher was looking at these, and they just approached me and said, "Hey, do you want to put this together into a book?" And it's like, I've actually already written part of it. I'd be absolutely happy to work with you. And really, what the book is about is all the considerations that you have to put together an intelligence operation. Everybody's like, "Well, I don't need this. I'm not in the military." But when you look at it, we do intel, and we do the same steps of collecting, analyzing, and doing, making decisions. The same things that we do, whether we're a legal firm or we're a sports team sports teams collect on other sports teams. Yeah. They watch their videos. They check their injury rosters. They see who's bought by who. They see who's been arrested, whatever. That all of that factors into their gameplay. That's all of it is the same process that we do for intelligence. And so, it's a huge industry outside of DoD. And I didn't really realize this until I was doing training again for the Army. But then we were doing some training courses on analysis and things like that outside publicly available courses. And the first people we got in was somebody from Disney. And, it was somebody who was working out of their Burbank studios that wanted to know about force protection and how to analyze threats to the theme parks. Now, if you think about Disney as a company, you're supposed to go to their theme parks and then all the cares of the real world are supposed to just melt away.
Yeah.
And the attention to detail that they put into their parks and, from the music to the food and everything else. Well, think about if one person with the vehicle-borne truck bomb shows up in front of Magic Kingdom and blows themselves up.
Yeah.
The entire business model of Disney is wiped out in a single instant.
Yeah.
So it's extremely important for the physical security of their parks, and I call it, protecting the secret sauce of the recipe for whatever company it is. So, all of that is the same thing that the U.S. government and the military has done in the past. Now the rest of our society has figured out that they're doing the same thing. And so that's really what, the book is based around, building all the considerations of running an intel operation and the data that you have to consider, the tools you want to put in place, and then the people and the processes. And if you don't have all four of those things in place, up and running, then your operation is going to fail. And that's really what it is. It's a textbook, but it's not really written for, straight college graduates or things like that. It's meant for practitioners in the field.
I love it. Practitioners always need more help. And you're right. Understanding what you need back in your subcell of your subset in that side group,
absolutely,
gives me an idea of what I need. That's important because I'm having all of these conversations, and I come upon a farmer. I've got an idea of the question set that I want to ask, but I'm fishing the whole time. And maybe I'm going to change my question set right in the middle of it because I know that you're looking for, this variable. And if I can find that, then I know. But I have to know that you're looking for it,
Right.
And It's so hard to link those things because, again, I get tasked with things that I know are dumb. And so I honestly typically ignore those things. Like the commander's IRs, all of them, are typically written in a vacuum. Yeah, I know. Where's the bomb? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go ask that every day. Where's Bo Bergdahl? Great. I'm not asking that every day. But I am going to go out and have conversations and try to find out what's really going on in the area. Because if I walk around a battlefield asking where are the bombs and where's Bo Bergdahl, I'm going to get shot.
Right. It's interesting. It's Bradley now Chelsea Manning. I trained him or her in counterterrorism analysis before he stole all those secrets. He went through one of our courses.
Yeah.
Jokingly, we were going to put his picture up in the classroom, telling him this was our honor graduate, but
oh my God,
the leadership didn't think that was too funny.
Yeah. Actually, I've got a Bradley/Chelsea Manning story too. When he was doing that, he was at a unit that I was supporting. As the crow flies, you can't because it's a building, but he was less than 100 feet from me. I'm saying he at the time because he was Bradley then. And when he had that crisis of conscience, whether he's a horrible person or not, I'm not really here to say anything about that. But knowing what I knew about the State Department and the nonsense that was going on, I don't know that I could have given him good counsel. Like, I understand. I don't condone what he did, but I understand why he did because there was a lot of arrogance, continues to be a lot of arrogance, especially in the State Department. And that stuff was putting me in harm's way unnecessarily. Just the ignorance and the arrogance.
Well, it becomes tough because you have a unique perspective that a lot of folks don't have. Not even myself. So there's, to me, it's anybody who does it. There's a right way of doing it. I mean, there's whistleblowing protections and laws, and you could do it internally. But again, sacrificing national security is unacceptable.
Yeah. I mean, definitely there was a better path.
Of course,
he
could have
actually,
Yeah, he could have gone to somebody. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Well, listen, we never even got to DB Cooper, but I want to respect your time. So can we come back and when the book is out?
If you want to we'll do another one. No problem.
And that's awesome. Okay. Thanks for coming on the show, man. I appreciate you.
Oh, sure. It's great to hear from you. In fact, all these years, I always have tremendous respect and admiration for all the guys and gals I work with. I mean, I think about everybody often, especially as we get older, and we see that the things that we did, and you just look back. It's like, God, I can't believe I did that and thought that was some cases. I can't believe I did that and thought that was a good idea.
Oh my God.
But again, it was just we did what we needed to do, and I appreciate that you're out there with me.
Hey, I always offer this, and I forgot to say this. Do you want to ask me a question or 5?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, I think I might have asked you earlier. It's just like, how did you get from doing what you did to what you're doing now? And that's the biggest. I see that a lot with folks that I get folks ask me all the time, how do you get an intel? My number one answer is go do something else first.
Yeah.
But then again, you run into guys like yourself where you're doing muddy boot stuff and you're out there as an agent or whatever. Next thing you know, and you're hosting a radio show.
Yeah.
I mean, fantastic leap, but you really is. My question is, what's your thought process and the risks that you knew you had to take when you were leaving the military? Because that's a lot of folks who leave the military have a very myopic view of what they think they can do once they leave. And it's not once they get out, then they realize, oh my gosh, there's all this other stuff that I'm qualified for.
Yeah. That's a great question. The transition almost killed me. I had done a lot of stuff. I was very, very, very influential at the brigade level. I could tell a commander what they were going to be saying to me in 3 months because they are all the same person. I had figured them out. I cracked the code. I had a system that worked wonderfully. And then I came back and I'm like, I know how to do culture. I know all these things. I can gather information from all these areas. I can really help a lot of companies, and I would apply for things that I was completely qualified for and never get a call back. And I instantly, my relationship was over because I was always gone, and my girlfriend at the time had, addiction problems. Mm-hmm. My money soon ran out. Professionally, I had no guide wire anymore because I couldn't find any work from anybody. And I was completely unmoored. And so it was terrifying.
Yeah.
And it turns out the podcast is exactly what I do. It's still muddy boots work. I go out every day. I don't know who I'm going to encounter, but I want to talk to them. And each one of these shows is a field report. And then I synthesize things as a field guy, not at the high level analysis guy, but as a field guy. And I get a sense for things, and that kind of guides me towards the next person I talk to. And so, and I've only sort of recently realized this, but I went back to my roots. I go out, I work hard, I put out reports, and I listen for what, the boss is saying. The boss is the audience. The boss is humanity. The more I hear the political argument back and forth, the more I go, okay, there's too much of that and there's too much of that. What's going on here in the middle? And so it's really largely the same discipline. And obviously the interview part is exactly the same, just slightly tuned different. But that's the transition of that. And I'm not going to say it was easy because, like I said, it damn near killed me. I'm not going to act like I make a bunch of money, but there's a lot of opportunity in doing what I do. And the network of people that I get to help out, I just keep putting value. This is the difference between combat and the radio and the podcast, is I continue to put value into people's lives and into my show. And then I get a return. I get something back from it that uplifts me. It doesn't burn me out. I don't use up years of my life.
Right. When you're active duty, you get that question. You ask yourself that every day. It's like, what good are you doing for the country today?
Yeah.
And then once you leave active duty, then, I ran this question as a defense contractor, but it's more of how much money are you making us today? And you're still doing great things for the country as a defense contractor, but after a while, you start to take a look and say, well, what am I doing for my family? What am I doing for myself? And then in a lot of cases, depending on how religious you are, like, what am I doing for my God?
Right.
And those things become, as you get older, you change your priorities on those things that you want to service and support. And that's I think it's hats off to you for being able to do that. There are a lot of folks that leave the military every day that need, that still need that guide to find out, what's my purpose in life.
Yeah. Yeah. And God bless the civilian community. They want to help. But when Google puts out an MOS search thing that links you to jobs and it gets stumped by 97 Bravo.
Yeah.
Like, oh man.
Right.
I don't know if there's a job. I was talking to someone the other day who was a special operator. He's like, why did you seem like a guy who could be a SEAL? And I'm like, yeah, for sure. I mean, that might have been a thing, but my job was so good. I got to do it so much. There really wasn't it would be like a lateral move at best. And that's if I made it. We're so fortunate to have this incredible job, but it is hard to explain to the rest of the world what it is that we do, especially like you did something completely different than what I did.
Right. Exactly. And that's, I tell you, that's one of the dilemmas that I run into, and a lot of the folks in the military run into, is after the longer you're in it, the less and less you get to do the things that you might really like. And so that's, as I got to the point where, that's one of the reasons why I got out, is that, my choices were very limited, and it all became manager this and commander this. But you're really more generic in your position the higher you get. You're going to be doing the same things, dealing with budget and personnel and everything else. And it's like, wait a minute, all that stuff I like to do for the analysis piece, all the stuff I like to do for the covert ops piece, I don't get to do that anymore. And you got to realize that that's for the younger bloods. And you got to figure out, okay, then how can I transition to keep the fires burning inside my own motivation?
Yeah.
I got to find something else. And again, it's like I said, you found it, and that's hats off to you for doing that.
One of the best pieces of advice I got was someone from the 165th, Nancy Richards. She happened to be my boss also at Fort Huachuca.
Oh, great.
The 309th. And actually, we were in a bunch of units. We were the 304th, the 309th. We kept, Huachuca's weird. Anyhow, she's like, hey, let's get you promoted, because that was hard to do in my era. And I'm like, I'm not worried about E6. It's not that big of a deal to me. I'd rather someone who's going to stay in get it. So I sort of bypassed that. And she's like, let's get you a master's degree and get out. Go do something else. Just like you said, go do something else. And it turns out it was great advice, because I was better at being with the military, and I was great at being in the field doing that muddy boots work. No one can outdo that with me. They can be my peer, but no one's going to out-collect me. And it gave me an opportunity. It doesn't make sense in terms of, do you want a retirement and all that kind of stuff, but life hardly ever makes sense. But the fact that I got to come back and be independent, but learn how to work within a system. I had to learn how to speak commander. I had to learn how to get sergeant majors to not hate me when I showed up in a mixed uniform all the time and a beard. And, that's stuff that you could only do if you were that muddy boots guy. And so I was lucky enough to get that path. But again, that path nearly killed me several times.
Right. No, I understand completely. I mean, I had my branch call me before I left the service, and they said, hey, we need to find your replacement. You're the first guy in the Army that has been in that position. We don't really know who to put in your place. I said, well, you need a strategic guy that has spent time at the tactical level. Yes. So we don't have anybody like that.
No,
so
you
the
don't.
Army's got a big problem then, doesn't it? Because that's what you got to have.
Yeah.
And they said, well, they'll pick one or the other, because you don't get guys that can do both levels.
Yeah.
And I said, then pick a tactical guy. They said, and of course the guy that came in had trouble, but adjusting to the new climate. But once he got it, he was fine. I mean, it just took that learning curve. So.
Yeah, I learned. I mean, this is the same thing. We keep talking about the same thing, and I know we're going kind of over time.
That's fine.
Part of what made me valuable is that I knew the spaceship, that tactical, the strategic or the theoretic level things. Those guys can't see what I see. They just see the continent of Africa, and they're like, well, go there and figure it out. So I would have to make a lot of trips to the spaceship so I could explain ground reality because the commander needed that ground truth, but I couldn't bypass the staff, because they would knife me in the back when I wasn't around, or even right there in front of my face. Like I've been killed in the staff room way more than I was ever in threat, in the actual battlefield. And that's true.
Oh no, understandable. No, that's the way it is.
Yeah. It's funny. Well, listen, again, thanks so much. It's a fascinating show. I know people are going to love it, and I can't wait to get it out and just do this again. And heck, I want to get Joe Garland on the show. That would be fantastic. And I'm just going to keep on doing these Spy versus Spy episodes because I just love the fuck out of them.
Oh, sure. That's great. I can hook you up with a lot of folks that I've kept in touch with just, again, because they're all great guys and gals. So